1,000 Miles Up the Nile, Section 32. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 1,000 Miles Up the Nile by Amelia B. Edwards. Chapter 10, The Cataract and the Desert, Part 2. Our Nubian auxiliaries struck work after this. Fate, they said, was adverse, so they went home, leaving us moored for the night in the pool at the top of the first rapid. The Sheikh promised, however, that his people should begin work next morning at dawn, and get us through before sunset. Next morning came, however, and not a man appeared upon the scene. At about midday they began dropping in, a few at a time, hung about in a languid, lazy way for a couple of hours or so, moved us into a better position for attacking the next rapid, and then melted away mysteriously by twos and threes among the rocks, and were no more seen. We now felt that our time and money were being recklessly squandered, and we resolved to bear it no longer. Our painter therefore undertook to remonstrate with the Sheikh, and to convince him of the error of his ways. The Sheikh listened, smoked, shook his head, replied that in the Cataract, as elsewhere, there were lucky and unlucky days, days when men felt inclined to work, and days when they felt disinclined. Today, as it happened, they felt disinclined. Being reminded that it was unreasonable to keep us 3 days going up 5 miles of river, and that there was a governor at Aswan to whom we should appeal tomorrow unless the work went on in earnest, he smiled, shrugged his shoulders, and muttered something about destiny. Now the painter, being of practical turn, had compiled for himself a little vocabulary of choice Arabic maledictions, which he carried in his notebook for reference when needed. Having no faith in its possible usefulness, we were amused by the industry with which he was constantly adding to this collection. We looked upon it, in fact, as a harmless pleasantry, just as we looked upon his pocket revolver, which was never loaded, or his brand-new fowling piece, which he was never known to fire. But the Sheikh of the Cataract had gone too far. The fatuity of that smile would have exasperated the meekest of men, and our painter was not the meekest of men. So he whipped out his pocketbook, ran his finger down the line, and delivered an appropriate quotation. His accent may not have been faultless, but there could be no mistake as to the energy of his style or the vigor of his language. The effect of both was instantaneous. The Sheikh sprang to his feet as if he had been shot, turned pale with rage under his black skin, vowed the Philae might stay where she was till doomsday, for aught that he or his men would do to help her a foot farther, bounded into his own rickety sandal, and rode away, leaving us to our fate. We stood aghast. It was all over with us. We should never see Abu Simbel now, never write our names on the book of the Abusir, nor slake our thirst with the waters of the Second Cataract. What was to be done? Must the Sheikh be defied or propitiated? Should we appeal to the governor, or should we immolate the painter? The majority were for immolating the painter. We went to bed that night despairing, but lo, next morning at sunrise appeared the Sheikh of the Cataract, all smiles, all activity, with no end of ropes and a force of 200 men. We were his dearest friends now. The painter was his brother. He had called out the ban and arriere ban of the Cataract in our service. There was nothing, in short, that he would not do to oblige us. The dragoman vowed that he had never seen Nubians work as those Nubians worked that day. They fell to like giants, tugging away from morn till dewy eve, and never giving over till they brought us round the last corner and up the last rapid. The sun had set, the afterglow had faded, the twilight was closing in, when our dahabeah slipped at last into level water, and the 200, with a parting shout, dispersed to their several villages. We were never known to make light of the painter's repertory of select abuse after this. If that notebook of his had been the drowned book of Prospero, or the magical papyrus of Thoth fished up anew from the bottom of the Nile, we could not have regarded it with a respect more nearly bordering upon awe. Though there exists no boundary line to mark where Egypt ends and Nubia begins, the nationality of the races dwelling on either side of that invisible barrier is as sharply defined as though an ocean divided them. Among the Shelali, or Cataract villagers, one comes suddenly into the midst of a people that have apparently nothing in common with the population of Egypt. They belong to a lower ethnological type, and they speak a language derived from purely African sources. Contrasting with our Arab sailors the sulky-looking, half-naked, muscular savages who thronged about the Philae during her passage up the Cataract, one could not but perceive that they are to this day as distinct and inferior a people as when their Egyptian conquerors, massing together in one contemptuous epithet all nations south of the frontier, were wont to speak of them as the vile race of Cush. Time has done little to change them since those early days. Some Arabic words have crept into their vocabulary. Some modern luxuries, as tobacco, coffee, soap, and gunpowder, have come to be included in the brief catalogue of their daily wants. But in most other respects they are living to this day as they lived in the time of the Pharaohs, cultivating lentils and durra, brewing barley beer, plaiting mats and baskets of stained reeds, tracing rude patterns upon bowls of gourd rind, flinging the javelin, hurling the boomerang, fashioning bucklers of crocodile skin and bracelets of ivory, and supplying Egypt with henna. The dexterity of which, sitting as if in a wager boat, they balance themselves on a palm log, and paddle to and fro about the river, is really surprising. This barbaric substitute for a boat is probably more ancient than the pyramids. Having witnessed the passage of the first few rapids, we were glad to escape from the dahabeah and spend our time sketching here and there on the borders of the desert, and among the villages and islands round about. In all Egypt and Nubia there is no scenery richer in picturesque bits than the scenery of the Cataract. An artist might pass a winter there, and not exhaust the pictorial wealth of those 5 miles which divide Aswan from Philae. Of tortuous creeks shut in by rocks fantastically piled, of sand slopes golden to the water's edge, of placid pools low-lying in the midst of lupin fields and tracts of tender barley, of creaking sakias, half hidden among palms and dropping water as they turn, of mud dwellings here clustered together in hollows, there perched separately on heights among the rocks, and perpetuating to this day the form and slope of Egyptian pylons, of rude boats drawn up in sheltered coves or going to pieces high and dry upon the sands, of water-washed boulders of crimson and black and purple granite, on which the wild fowl cluster at midday and the fisher spreads his nets to dry at sunset, of camels and caravans and camps on shore, of cargo boats and cangias on the river, of wild figures of half-naked athletes, of dusky women decked with barbaric ornaments, unveiled, swift-gliding, trailing long robes of deepest gentian blue, of ancient crones and little naked children like live bronzes. Of these and 100 other subjects, in infinite variety and combination, there is literally no end. It is all so picturesque, indeed so biblical, so poetical, that one is almost in danger of forgetting that the places are something more than beautiful backgrounds, and that the people are not merely appropriate figures placed there for the delight of sketchers, but are made of living flesh and blood, and moved by hopes and fears and sorrows like our own. End of section 32.